to look back and to look forward, which I think is the purpose of this conference, to appreciate where we've been and where we're going. As Marty told you, I work with the Office of Public Instruction and represent K-12 education and OPI on the State Commission of Community Service. I'm a former elementary teacher and administrator. And I want to open this session with a thought for you from Alice in Wonderland, a classic that many of us remember from our childhood. Well, we learned in Alice in Wonderland that if we don't know where we're going, any road will take us there. I think this conference is about helping us to see the road ahead as we look at the road behind. This session is really exciting because we're going to learn some things about our own region that I think we don't know. In fact, I want to introduce to you the co-author of the 2005 State of the Rockies report card from Colorado College in Colorado Springs. Bryan Hurlbutt co-authored this report. He graduated as a trustee scholar from Colorado College with a BA degree in May of 2004, majoring in physics. And he plans to attend law school in the fall of 2006. And President Dennison, we ought to see that he does that at the University of Montana. So please give a Montana welcome to Bryan Hurlbutt.
I apologize, the clicker isn't working for the PowerPoint slides, so I'm telling my friend here to clicker these slides. Thanks, Dan, for kicking off the conference. Such an informative and stimulating talk. Thanks to the governor and everyone involved in organizing this conference on a topic that really can't get enough attention, civic engagement. And thanks to all you civically engaged Montanans who turned out to this event. I'm Bryan Hurlbutt with the Colorado College State of the Rockies project. And last year in our annual research publication, the 2005 State of the Rockies report card, we graded every county in the Rocky Mountain West on civic capacity and engagement. So in this presentation, I'll go over exactly what civic engagement is. I'll present some somewhat alarming downward trends in national civic participation. I'll explain why civic involvement is so important to creating a community, even here in the Wild West. And I'll elaborate on the details of our report. How do we measure civic engagement in the Rockies, and what did we find? I hope that this presentation provides a somewhat solid, broad academic foundation for understanding the importance of the more practical aspects of civic engagement and the specific projects that you'll hear about throughout the rest of the conference today. And first, I'll tell you a little bit about the Colorado College State of the Rockies project. But before moving on, I'd like to give a special thanks to Shannon Stover from the Montana Commission on Community Service. When I first spoke to Shannon, I guess I'd say she was a little surprised to find out that I wasn't old enough to rent a car when I got to the airport. And I needed her to come pick me up. So I just want to thank her for picking me up, as well as for helping me tie my shoes and make sure I'm matching out. So thank you. Next slide. The Colorado College State of the Rockies project. We are Colorado College students, faculty, and staff. All the project's work is carried out by only 2 full-time staff members who are recent Colorado College graduates, with the oversight of 1 professor and the hard work of 5 student interns. Next slide. What do? We ask questions on critical socioeconomic, environmental, and community issues going on here in the Rocky Mountain West. We gather relevant data to understand those issues. We publish an annual research book entitled the Colorado College State of the Rockies Report Card, and we hold an annual State of the Rockies conference. Next.
Okay.
We do all this hard work to inform stakeholders, that's you guys, on critical regional issues, to encourage dialogue and collaborative action to address these issues. Also, to connect peer communities and share lessons and stimulate student outreach to the region. This is the 2005 State of the Rockies report card that came out last spring. We have some on sale outside of the table and your available for you to look through. They're also available online. Next. And here's some pictures from the 2005 State of the Rockies Conference in Colorado Springs, where we released the report card last April. We presented our findings, and we listened to and interacted with expert speakers from around the region on the issues. This included some really amazing talks by Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, Amory Levins of the Rocky Mountain Institute, Terry Anderson of PERC, Patricia Limerick from the Center of the American West at CU Boulder, and the author of Terry Tempest Williams. Next slide. Here's a look at the Rockies study region that we're talking about. I think this is the same region that Dan was talking about when he was suggesting a regional primary. There are 8 states in the region, 281 counties. States are Arizona, Colorado, Montana, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming. Next slide. So what's in the State of the Rockies report card? Each year we update a set of key indicators at the start of the report card, which we call the Rockies Vital Sign. Take the pulse of the Rockies people, employment, income, housing. This section sets the stage for the rest of the report card for defining our unique region and tracking our rapidly changing trends as we continue to grow so quickly. The vital signs tend to dispel some of the common myths that the Rocky Mountain West is still a backward land of rugged cowboys, roaming remote locations and fending for themselves. Amongst other things, these vital signs show that the Rockies is growing over 4 times as fast as the U.S. Most of us work in offices, not on farms or in forests. And contrary to what some may suspect, we are more educated than the U.S. Notice at the bottom right that here in the Rockies, Colorado has the highest percent of the population with a bachelor's degree, proving that us Coloradans aren't just a bunch of ski bums. Or at least if we are, we're well-educated ski bums, like a lot of Colorado college graduates. Next slide. Continuing on with the report card is grading the Rockies. This is the bulk of the report card where we rank counties, cities, and other geographic units in the Rockies on their effort and success in handling critical regional issues that we change from year to year. In 2005's in-depth grading of the Rockies sections are national parks under stress. Next. Creative occupation patterns. Next. Rockies sprawl index. Next. The toxic Rockies. Next. Rockies energy futures. Next. Native American tribes regaining sovereignty, success cases. Next. And civic engagement and capacity. Next. And we're currently working on the 2006 issues, doing the research for that. We're going to look at ranching in the Rockies, land conservation techniques, threatened and endangered species, global warming and its Rocky Mountain impact. We're going to look at the prospects for Western charter and presidential primary, environmental equity in the Rockies urban areas, new resource management techniques, and overall grading the Rockies on nurturing our families and youth. Next slide. So now on to civic engagement and capacity, measuring social capital for 281 counties in the 8-state Rocky Mountain West. Next slide. Our inspiration and main resource for studying civic capacity engagement in the Rockies is Robert Putnam's 2000 book, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community, which documents America's alarming decline in participation in civic life in every area, from political participation to backyard barbecues, and illustrates the negative impact of the loss of such a vital component of successfully functioning communities. In reference to the book's title, Putnam paints a disturbing picture of bowling lanes, once jammed with league members raucously interacting with one another, now empty save for a few lone, scattered bowlers throughout the alley, isolated from one another. Putnam was careful to be not too romantic in describing America in the 1950s and 60s, which had its problems, but states about those decades, quote, "Never in our history had the future of civic life looked brighter. What happened next to civic and social life in American communities is the subject of this book," end quote. American civil life took a turn for the worse in the 1970s and spiraled even further downward through the 80s and 90s. Putnam presents a staggering array of data to verify this downward trend in nearly every corner of civic involvement. Next slide. The focus of Putnam's analysis and our analysis is measuring something called social capital. Social capital is broader than what we traditionally think of as civic engagement. Social capital is made up of connections among individuals, of social networks, which come in a variety of forms, including volunteer groups, interacting with extended family or bowling leagues, with professional acquaintances, and even online chat groups. And what social capital theory says is that social capital has value. In the same way that physical capital, like a tool, is valuable to a business that uses the tool, or in the same way that human capital is a valuable asset to somebody who utilizes that human capital, social capital is a valuable asset to communities through reciprocal relationships. Basically, I'll help out now, knowing that down the road, I'll likely receive help if I need it through our community's complex web of social interaction. In creating strong communities, social capital theory not only stresses the value of obviously important activities like volunteering and philanthropy, but also more casual social interactions like gossiping with your neighbor and going out for drinks with a coworker. For example, I flew here from the East Coast yesterday and was fortunate enough to get an in-flight movie. It must have been fate because this movie provided the perfect example of the importance of activities like social interactions, casual social interactions, in facilitating more complex activities like volunteer work and philanthropy. Some of you may have guessed it, the movie was indeed Batman Begins. You guys have seen that? I guess maybe it's not the best example of not even really that good of a movie, but we have Batman, a volunteer crime fighter, working to make the streets of crime-ridden Gotham City safe for everyone. But his ability to effectively carry out his volunteer efforts is entirely dependent on a web of social interaction that he has in Gotham City. His casual conversations with his friend Rachel developed his motivation for fighting crime. His schmoozing and gossiping with many folks out in the community is his way of finding out information about the criminals. And his effectiveness at scaring criminals is centered around creating a lot of thoughts about how scary and tough he is. So networks among criminals and the media help get that word out. Next slide. So our country is facing a major civic recession. Our supply of social capital has faded away over the last few decades. Putnam breaks his analysis into 8 categories of social capital. Political participation, the principle on which our democracy is based, the fuel on which it is intended to run, is more accessible today than it was a few decades ago thanks to things like voting reform in the 60s. But even though we have more access, political participation has dropped since the 60s in almost every measurable way, from voter registration and turnout, to the number of candidates running for office, to hours volunteering for campaigns. Likewise, civic participation or involvement in non-governmental, non-profit organizations that are such an essential component to making our country run smoothly is down. And we're witnessing a startling shift from civic organizations that are locally rooted and based on active member participation to national advocacy groups that are professionally staffed and mostly just solicit money without seeking the kind of active participation that stimulates valuable social interaction. Next slide. By some measures, the U.S. is the most religiously devout country in the world, and religious worship has led the nation in facilitating the development of social capital. In the U.S., about 1/2 of all associated memberships, 1/2 of all volunteering, and 1/2 of all personal philanthropy are church-related. But as surveys show that our personal religious beliefs remain unchanged, our social religious activity has gone down. Church membership, worship attendance, and participation in non-worship activities like Sunday school and Bible studies are all down nationwide. Workplace connections are also in decline. We spend so much of our time at work these days, but we interact less and less with our coworkers as our workplaces become antisocial cubicle mazes. Next slide. We're also spending less time in informal social interactions. We've shifted from leisure habits of doing to leisure habits of watching. Not only are we watching more TV than we used to, but of the time spent watching TV, a lot of us are doing it more by ourselves, in isolation. And this is alarming because getting together, getting to know one another, exchanging ideas, and developing relationships is the most fundamental form of social capital in which more sophisticated types of civic involvement and community strength develop. Giving time and money to others through altruism, volunteering, and philanthropy is also down in nearly every measurable way, with one exception. Finally, a hopeful sign in Putnam's work was youth volunteering is up. So congratulations to you youth that are here. And you baby boomers need to follow your kids' example and start getting involved. Next slide. Reciprocity, honesty, and trust important in facilitating social interaction are also down in most measurable ways across the country. And as these dwindle, we are increasingly settling problems that we once settled informally with each other in more formal institutions like the law. And the last category that Putnam looks at for social capital includes a few areas where Putnam found promising signs. Participation in small groups, social movements, and on the net is up in some ways. But these positive findings do not come close to compensating for the many downward trends in most other measurable categories of social capital. Next slide. So what is causing this ebb in social capital? Strangely, education, which is the most important predictor of many social capital categories, is up nationwide for nearly every demographic group. So that doesn't seem to be a problem. Putnam doesn't find conclusive evidence to blame any one culprit, but he finds some characteristics of modern American life that are contributing to our civic recession. Pressures of time and money have created a very busy populace a lot. Mobility and sprawl of like time-consuming commutes, social segregation, and separation of self from place. Technology and mass media have shifted our leisure activities from those where we were doing and active to those where we were watching and more passive. And generational change is contributing as an unusually civically engaged generation has been replaced by a less engaged generation. And the breakdown of the traditional family may be contributing as well. Next slide. So what? Should we be worried as our nation's social capital fades? Yes. And simply, an increasing body of hard evidence verifies that social capital is valued in community. A healthy supply of social capital makes communities that are smarter, healthier, safer, richer, and better able to govern a just and stable democracy. Next slide. So how can we revitalize American civic life? Putnam advocates an era of social innovation and civic creativity, where instead of trying to revert to the good old days of the 50s and 60s, we instead reinvent 21st century versions of groups like the Boy Scouts and NAACP to meet modern needs and tap into modern sentiments. Our civic regeneration depends on individuals, the government, and all types of groups and organizations to commit to engage themselves and support a national framework that enables an active participation in community. Thanks. Now on to social capital in the Rockies. Polling alone shows that this alarming civic recession is occurring nationwide and somewhat in every state, meaning that social capital is eroded and may still be eroded here in the Rockies. But as we heard earlier, in some ways the Rockies isn't doing as bad things elsewhere. But is social capital a big deal in the West? I mean, this is the isolated, lawless Rockies, where we fend for ourselves. And we're on the rare occasion that we encounter another person, we settle our disputes with guns, right? I guess you heard earlier that that's not necessarily true. It's now well documented that the Wild West we see in the movies is clearly not in touch with reality when it comes to describing the Rockies today, and it's even pretty far off in understanding the Rockies' history. We're not very rugged. We depend immensely on each other and the government, and almost all of us live in urban areas where we have ample opportunity to develop strong social ties. This is something we continue to show in the Rockies report card. But how strong are our social connections in the Rockies? Next slide. We decided not to take a look at the decline in social capital here in the Rockies over the decades, but instead attempt to quantify the current stock of social capital in the Rocky Mountain West at the county level and by assigning grades A through D. By grading every county, we aim to highlight the most healthy communities when it comes to civic life in the Rockies, which may be able to provide good examples for, to be politically correct, more civically challenged communities. Counties that may be in need of a little guidance and revitalizing civic engagement. To be perfectly honest, we like to assign grades to push people's buttons a little, not to make people angry, but to inspire people to really take a thoughtful look at the communities in which they live and to get involved in constructive dialogue and productive action. Next slide. It turns out, after weeks of searching through Putnam's myriad social capital measures, that most of the data just isn't available for every single county in the Rocky Mountain West. So we had to settle for 25 social capital indicators that were available region-wide. We decided to break social capital into two different meaningful subcategories for our analysis. One is civic capacity, which is a measure of community infrastructure for facilitating civic involvement, and the other is civic engagement, which is a measure of actual community participation in civic life. We also divide the Rockies counties into metropolitan, micropolitan, and rural to give more accurate comparison between similar counties. Next slide. I apologize, this isn't the easiest slide to see, but on the list, on the left, it lists the general social capital categories under which our 25 social capital indicators fall. And then it lists those indicators as either a measure of civic capacity in the center or civic engagement on the right. So for example, in religious involvement category, near the bottom, in civic capacity, you'll see the number of congregations per capita. Whereas under civic engagement, you'll see things more like religious attendance. Since we had such a hard time finding social capital indicators throughout the region, you'll notice that some of these indicators, like the ones under education and health categories, are not direct measures of social capital, but instead measure things that are strongly associated with the prevalence of social capital. So this is by no means an ideal set of indicators for measuring social capital, but we're confident that it does provide meaningful analysis of community health in the Rockies. Next slide. So I'm just going to take you through a quick look at some of the grades that we assigned on civic capacity and engagement. For more information, you can take a look at the report card. But here are the grades on overall social capital, which is the combination of the county's score for civic capacity and civic engagement. These are the 10 most civically vibrant metropolitan communities in the Rockies by our measures. For Montana, Missoula, Yellowstone, and Carbon counties made the list. Next slide. And here are the micropolitan top 10. For Montana, Lewis and Clark, Valley, and Madison counties made the list. Next slide. And the rural top 10, Meager and Liberty, Montana made the list. Next. Here's a look at all the...
Mar.
Every time we go talk, we're learning how to actually pronounce these names, so feel free to keep correcting. So here's a look at all the counties in Montana that came out below the regional average, earning grades from C- to B. And let me know later if you have any thoughts as to whether that's accurate or not, because I'd be glad to hear that. But overall, we found that the amount of social capital, which is essential to maintaining functioning communities here in the West, does vary significantly from county to county in the Rockies. As those counties that earn better grades tend to be more energetic in mobilizing and collaborating to address community problems than do civically challenged communities. Next slide. I just wanted to close by suggesting that developing a robust, diverse stock of social capital is even more crucial here in the Rocky Mountain West than in other parts of the country. This actually occurred to me last week after Dan Kennis rudely interrupted me while I was preparing this very presentation by sending me an email asking us at the Rockies Project to respond to a tricky question he posted on Headwaters News. His question was, what lies at the core of the emergence of regionalism in the Rockies? This was in response to a suggestion that the Rockies hold a joint regional primary to gain influence in national politics. It's clear to us at the Rockies Project that the Rocky Mountain region's distinct features, its unique history, open space, large proportion of federal lands, aridity, swift population growth, abundance of natural amenities, and popularity of vacationers all create a very unique set of difficult challenges for the region, requiring innovative solutions. As Dan pointed out, we don't have a strong regional voice, so our unique needs are not given adequate attention at the national level. And our communities are in urgent need. I don't want to scare anyone, but we need help. People love the Rockies, myself included, and I'm sure many of you. That's why we choose to live, work, play, and vacation here. That's why the region's full-time and part-time populations are growing so rapidly. But the characteristics that make the region so attractive are threatened by such speedy growth. The Rockies region's biggest challenge is to keep from loving itself to death, which means getting one step ahead of all this love in order to reap the potential benefits of growth, while at the same time preserving the region's cherished but fragile character. It's so important for us to develop and put to use community-level social capital here in the Rockies, and regional-level social capital. because our communities are in serious need of help right now, and we aren't getting that help from outside. We decided that the core of emerging regionalism in the Rockies is so much love for such a unique place in such urgent need of care. Fortunately, we can tap into that love, we can get involved and engage where we live to address the challenges our communities face, while at the same time building from the ground up the kind of participation necessary to create a coherent and powerful regional voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan. It's given us a lot to think about. Can you hear me in chat? My mother would be very surprised if you could. The structure of this session is that now that we've heard about the report card, we're going to have two Montana respondents to present some ideas to us. And first, we're going to hear from Tracie MacDonald. I first knew Tracie when she worked as a guidance counselor in the Ronan Public Schools. And she did that until about 3 years ago when she became an administrator for student affairs at the Salish Kootenai College. She was a participant in the Leadership Plenty process, a community-based leadership formation program of the Pew Charitable Trust. Please welcome Tracie MacDonald. For us sureties.
Might take it off.
I'm honored and thankful for being invited to speak here today, and I appreciate the wonderful support that this conference is getting from Governor Schweitzer and from President Dennison. I also thoroughly enjoyed the comments of Dan's speech, and I'm so glad that our commissioners are here to take part in this conference. I think it's so important. And I'm also thankful for all of you that took time today to come here and share ideas. But before I comment on the report, I would like to tell you a little bit about what I've been currently involved in as far as civic engagement in my area of Montana. I've had the opportunity to work with a program called Leadership Plenty that is funded by the Northwest Foundation, but it's really a Verizon's grant that was written by our tribal welfare program in partnership with our Salish Kootenai College. And the main gist of that whole program is to enhance economic development and reduce poverty. We picked 3 communities on our reservation to work with. One is the beautiful Tri-City area of Big Arm, Dayton, and Elmo on the western shores of Flathead Lake, if you guys have taken that drive. Another area is the Hot Springs community, and then the beautiful mountain valley city of Arlee. Yeah. We picked those 3 areas to work with our project because of a variety of reasons, but the main reasons are we picked Elmo because according to the 2000 census, Elmo is the poorest city in Montana. We picked Hot Springs because we have 7 cities on our reservation, but the Hot Springs is very geographically isolated, and it doesn't get in on all the economic development that our tribe offers many of the other cities on our res. And because of its isolation, resources like food, healthcare, higher education is really limited. And it's a very interesting community to work with. We've dug in deep there, and a lot of things are happening. We're excited about it. We picked Arlee because it is rapidly becoming a bedroom community of Missoula. As Missoula is growing out, Arlee is fighting like crazy to hang on to its cultural integrity. And our native peoples there are greatly impacted, along with our rural, small town, non-native families. And so that impact, we're working there. So 3 different individual communities with special needs. Now what is Leadership Plenary? Well, it's a program that recognizes the wealth and capacities that people have in our communities. We already know that people work in many things and help out in many things like youth groups, churches, fire departments, city councils, social clubs, schools, cultural committees, tribal organizations, and so on. And they're investing their time and energy to make their communities a better place. What the Leadership Plenary model does is it brings all these diverse groups together, and it creatively finds common ground with people that don't normally cluster together. And then they collectively tackle the tough problems like economic development and poverty. As people come together, a new mindset forms, and this was the beautiful thing about it when you see it happen, is they start looking at the community, especially rural communities like this, and they start seeing assets, not deficits. It's really an asset-based model where we really look at all the possibilities. Instead of seeing a deserted piece of property that's all overgrown with weeds, I just use an example. Instead, they start seeing what that can become, what can be there, what they themselves can do. And so they start seeing possibilities and not limitations. They get together, they create a shared vision of what they want their community to look like. And then as the program unfolds, it builds leadership and leaders from within, equipping them with skills they need in order to take action and combine resources, which are critical skills for citizenship and building relationships. It is a new way of constructing decision-making in communities and engaging people who are normally left out of civic life. The program is intensive and it's locally based, and it's for all ages. The program supports and provides supports for childcare, transportation, and meals to individuals so they can enable them to participate in our busy world, and they can participate in a variety of activities. Some of these activities are leadership classes, grant writing workshops, projects promoting wellness and art, study circles that brings new life to things that have already been going on. And I can't enforce enough about study circles and how important they are. And you'll probably hear more about that later today as groups get together. Youth camps and town hall meetings on building stronger communities. Now, many of you might not know, but besides being a Montana resident and a citizen of the United States, I'm also a tribal member of the Salish and Kootenai tribes. I have civic responsibilities and governances in both of these arenas. So I think as we look at this strengths of civic engagement, and as we look at the wide range of areas in Montana, we definitely want to include our Indian populations in those special cultural components that show civic engagement that occur in those areas. And I'm just going to give you some examples from my home tribe. Native people recognize and honor always elders in making decisions regarding their social, economic, and cultural aspects of developing their communities. Now, an example of that would be, and you guys have taken that drive up and over the missions and headed to Glacier Park, and you'll appreciate the story. In 1978, our tribe was getting tremendous pressure to log the front of the missions. And that would be like if you crest over Roe Valley, that beautiful scenic area all the way to just to north of Pablo. And they're getting tremendous pressure for economic reasons, for jobs, for money that it would bring in. And there were many of us that opposed that. But because the pressure was so strong, it was going to go. And it was our elders that stepped forward before the council and said, no, you cannot log the face of the missions because of those sacred sites that are there and those vision quest sites that are there. And the council immediately voted it down. Indian people value all living creatures and go to great lengths protecting them and their environment that they live in. We recognize every living creature has a significant purpose and place. And another example of that would be the government now has forced a 4-lane highway dissecting our reservation. Because of a provision that was found in the Upper Missouri River Treaty. Our tribe has opposed this for lots of reasons, but mostly because of the amount of wildlife that crosses that highway. There's so much wildlife getting killed now on 93. If a 4-lane goes through, it's really going to increase that. We have deer that cross between the Missions and the Lolo Forest right around Evero. That is a natural crossing there. And we have grizzlies that cross at the Post Creek area. And if you ever hear of a grizzly getting killed on our res, that's where it always is that is a natural crossing. It always has been for grizzlies. And then we are losing our turtles up in our wetlands in our Nine Pipes area. And there's been many, many studies on the turtles and what's happening to the turtles. So our tribe went to battle, and a lot of committees were raised, and a lot of energy was invested, and those of you around Missoula probably read about it in the paper time and time again on keeping that 4-lane out. Over the years, though, we've come to an agreement with the state of Montana and the Highway Commission on building this, I think, beautiful highway. What you're going to see now, protecting the wildlife, is as you come up over and crest into Evero, there's going to be a 100-yard long tunnel that 93 will pass under with a dirt ground covering and special fencing that's going to guide all those deer and some elk, some cats over the top while the highway goes underneath. You'll see lots and lots of bridges. There's one right out of Arley, a real wide bridge with special fencing that's going to help with wildlife, and that's what'll be down at Post Creek for the grizzlies. And the fencing will kind of guide them, and they will cross underneath. As you go down Polson Hill, there's more of those where wildlife is going to go underneath. And in the Nine Pipes area, there's special octagon culverts that are being built that are extra wide. They have all these dirt and special floor to it, so the turtles will get across the highway. And how they're going to direct those turtles, I don't know. We all know they take their time, it's nice and wide, and the highway will go up and over it. So when this whole thing is done, right now, because of the energy and the forethought and the planning, the tribe is going to get special national award from the Wildlife Federation on this highway. So we're excited. So Native people also have many celebrations, and they're annual and they're seasonal. These celebrations are meant for social interaction, dancing and singing, gambling in a fun way with stick and hand games, and family gatherings and camping. Indian people also gather at wakes, where you'll see large groups come together to help a family that's suffering from a loss. And these can go anywhere from if you're providing spiritual help, or you are cooking, or you're helping with small children that are at the wake, and large groups coming together helping the family. And these can go from anywhere from 1 to 3 days. Also, Native people have put much reverence and importance in their youth. An example of that was in 1986, when corporations at that time wanted to put a run of river dams on the Flathead River between Kerr Dam and down by Dixon. And this would have created a lot of small reservoirs, but it would have directly affected the river quality, and fish wouldn't spawn anymore. Our fish wouldn't be spawning, and the whole river would have been lost. We would have lost historical camps that our people a long time ago gathered with their sister tribes, where they hunted and fished, and where they gathered black moss for special ceremonies and things like that. Our osprey and eagle nests, we would have lost all those nesting areas along the river. And there was a push at that time, that same kind of push to our council for economics. You know, it was going to bring in money. more than anything. It wasn't going to bring in jobs, but it was going to bring in money. And the power that would have been created from that, from Montana Power, would have reimbursed the tribe. And there was a big push. Our tribe needed the money at that time, but it was our youth, along with our elders, that protested this at that time and stepped forward. And it was our youth that went before the council, and they held forums, educational forums on the importance of the river. They protested, they led marches, and the elders are right behind them, saying we don't want to lose these sites. And it was relentless until the council backed down and did not push those dams through. And to this day, our youth still carry the wellness of the river, because we have, with our natural resource department, they put on a 2-day event where anywhere from 900 to 1,000 school-aged children come down to the river, and they hold lessons on the importance of the river and the history of the river. And as long as we keep that going, they'll never dam that river. So that's the importance that youth hold to Indian people, and on both ends. There are many cultural and spiritual gatherings of great importance that many Indian people take part in: special camps, dances, trips to historical sites, and gathering of special foods. The best example of civic leadership that just recently happened, and I'm so proud of our tribal council for that, was this remarkable vote that occurred in July, I believe, and it's going to be coming in to effect, I think, this month, or it's November. But we have an IIM account that's set up for our youth, and all our Pure Dam money, which tripled a few years back, and we were able to set this plan in motion, but couldn't push this through until just lately, was that income from our tribal resource. It's not federal dollars, it's our tribal resource money. Is put, half of it's been always put in a special savings account for our youth until they turn 18. And then they can pull it out and hopefully go to college with it or other things like that, use it for what is needed to further their life. But what we found is we have many tribes on our reservation, tribal people from different tribes, that's the best way to put that, because of our college, and people moving in and marrying and things like that. And right now we have 52 tribes at Salish Community College coming in to study there. But our own tribe, our Kootenai, Salish, and Pend Oreille students that are tribal members in all our city high schools, there were 81 potential graduates last year, maybe in a school teacher movement. And only 23 graduated. 81 potential and 23 graduated. And part of that reason, there's a variety of reasons, but part of the reason is because if they turn 18 their senior year, they can access that IIM account, which is an average of $15,000, some more, some less. And so the council voted through a thing now that says that they can access that IIM account unless at 18, unless they have a GED or a high school diploma. And then if they don't have either, they have to wait until they're 21. They have to also participate in 20 hours of financial planning. So we're excited. All the educators in the Valley are excited about that one. We'll get those guys through high school, and I know the President Dennison will like the fact that they're going to have their high school before we head on into the U of M or MSU. I have a daughter that goes to MSU. So the report card of civic engagement from Indian Country would perhaps include all that has been discussed by Bryan, but must also measure elder participation in regards to social dynamics of decisions made by each tribe in Montana, or the Rocky Mountain West, especially environmental and cultural issues. We must measure the numbers of youth and the opportunities they are given to participate in shaping their world. We must find a way to measure how we become involved with issues and provide for all living creatures on Mother Earth and not just humans. And as we look at social capacity, we would also want to include our diverse Indian populations in Montana that live communally, participating in many civic events that range from wakes to feasts, from powwow celebrations to tribal council elections, from tribal quarterly meetings that are similar to a town hall meeting, to elders gathering to pick canvas and bitter it with young children. All of this is civic engagement. As far as mainstream societal civic activities, we must look for every opportunity to engage our diverse populations. People that might be geographically isolated and weighted down with poverty. We must promote and provide for programs like Leadership Plenty that teaches the skills to participate. And I just want a quick story. I know we're crunching time here, but what Dan Kent said about exercise and body politic, I got a big kick out of that with endorphins, because working in our league, we were just all fired up. We were rolling. We had so many projects going in May, and the community was just high, just like that. The endorphins were flying. And we couldn't think of the next project to do. And then we made the fatal error of giving them the summer off. And so, just like a body, if we let one day go, what do we want to do? We want to sit around and watch TV and not get out and exercise. And that's what happened to us. We tried to fire it up in our league again. Oh, we've been having a tough time getting it going again, because it's fall football season. But we'll get our body back in shape. And I want to thank all of you for your efforts, and a heartfelt thank you for making our world a better place.
A quick introduction of Bruce Whittenberg. Bruce is the Executive Director of Leadership Montana. He was the publisher of the Helena Independent Record from 93 to 98 and publisher of the Billings Gazette from 1998 to 2000. He currently serves on the Board of Directors of the Harmley Billings Library Foundation, the Board of Directors of the Billings Police Foundation, the Board of Trustees for the Montana State University Billings Foundation, and immediate past president of the Board of Directors of the Alberta Fair Theater for the Performing Arts. You can see that Bruce Whittenberg is actively engaged in his community and in the community of the state. And recently, he was appointed by Governor Brian Schweitzer to serve on the Montana Community for the Humanities. Please welcome Bruce Whittenberg.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really a privilege and an honor to be on this agenda today. Not so much because I'm the last speaker before lunch, but because I get to be around people like Tracie, Bryan, Dan Kemmis, President Dennison, and so many others. I learned a lot from Brian's presentation this morning, and I learned a lot from the report card on the Rockies. But the most important thing I learned this morning is to watch my pronunciation. You guys were just brutal. I remember Bar.
I mean, I thought about that. Makes perfect sense now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate Brian's remarks this morning and the work on the report. I just completed reading a book called Freakonomics, which you've probably heard of. It's pretty light. But reading this report reminded me of one of the key points in the book. That being that the most likely result of having read this report, like any data set that you might come across, is that we find ourselves asking a lot of questions. Many of the questions will lead to nothing. Some may result in action, however rare that might be. But as I look at data like this, I ask, what are the hidden issues in a report card like this? As this report card indicates, we are a culture that values civic engagement, be it voting, volunteering, running for public office, or other community service. But one of the observations I had is that there seems to be a gap between civic capacity in Montana and civic engagement. And I wonder why. Through our civic engagement, we've expressed our belief that we share responsibility for the quality of life in our communities. not only in the present tense, but for future generations. Having relocated to Montana in 1993 after a lifetime growing up in the Midwest, my family and I quickly observed the self-reliance of Montana communities. Through civic engagement, the arts, education, Montana communities learn to adapt and work together. As the report says, cooperation, not individualism, tamed the West. I want to say just a word or two about Leadership Montana because I am going to draw on some of the concepts from Leadership Montana, but I don't want to use this time to tell you about the program. What I will tell you is that there are a number of folks here that helped create Leadership Montana, which is now involved with the second class of the program, and a number of folks here who are members of Leadership Montana. So if any of you were organizers or members of Leadership Montana, would you raise your hand, please? Okay, there's several people around. They'd be glad to tell you about the program and could do a lot better job than I could. And I hope that in 10 years from now, when I ask that question, this room is full of folks that have been involved with Leadership Montana. But in the program, we discussed a theme of trusteeship. And I'd like to share some thoughts on this concept. And for these remarks, I'll use an article by Catherine Tyler Scott. It's called Trusteeship, Developing Self-Organizations and Community. I put a few copies out there on a table, and it's also available to download from our website, leadershipmontana.org. In considering the concept of trusteeship, we believe it helps to frame the discussion in a historical context. The history of your state, the history of your community, and your personal history. And one of the exercises that we use in the Leadership Montana class is to create a personal history timeline. An exercise in exploring the events of our lives that shaped who we are today as individuals. What is your story over time? For me, it was a fairly emotional exercise when I found myself thinking back on my family, my parents, my children, my grandparents, the events that occurred during my lifetime that made me who I am today. It brings to the surface real passion and priority. What are the things that are important to you? What do you care about? What really turns you on? As Montana trustees, we discussed the key themes in Montana history that shape this state, who we are as a people and a place. This past month, the Leadership Montana class heard from Dr. Tim LeCain, who's an assistant professor of history at MSU at our recent retreat, and talked about those key themes. In another article, Jonathan Burns, for the Harvard Business School, wrote an article called The Essence of Leadership. He describes a leader as a great doer and a great reflector. So I think it's important, and I encourage you to look backwards even as you look forward. It's important, too, to consider our role as trust holders, to recognize that trusteeship involves a significant shift in perspective. Francis Hesselbein, who's chairman of the Peter Drucker Foundation for Nonprofit Management, talks about the how-to-be leader, the shift from doing things right to doing the right things. As you begin to explore your own perspectives, passions, and knowledge, things begin to shift a little bit. Robert Greenleaf, author of Servant Leadership, said, "Awareness is not a giver of solace, but a disturber of peace." Now, how many of you serve in a volunteer capacity on a board or with an organization only because of your standing in the community? Be honest. Oh, come on. Let me explain what I mean by that. Do you truly hold that organization in trust? Or were you the publisher of the newspaper and got invited to be on the board because you control some dollars and some influence? And there's a real difference there. Are you filling a term? Again, Burns says, leaders are people who leave their footprints in their areas of passion. Trusteeship involves assessing the causes that you are most deeply concerned about and whether you are spending appropriate time, energy, and resources with those causes. In short, are you exercising your passion and integrity? Is there congruence between what you believe and what you do in your civic engagement? Again, Burns says, to be a great leader, you need to find what you really like. That's where the passion, commitment, and integrity come from. The most important underlying factor in leadership is when a person has searched out and found a great match between what's in his or her heart and what it is he or she really enjoys doing. You know, as I was getting ready this morning, I had the Today Show on the TV, and they were interviewing this guy named Kevin Liles, and he's a young producer of hip-hop music, and they said, how did you get so successful so fast? And he said, find the most passionate thing inside you and make it happen. And I thought, God, that's perfect. It fits exactly what I'm talking about today. Well, in the data you saw presented today, I think you may have seen the gap between civic capacity and civic engagement in Montana. We had a lot of recognition in the civic capacity area. That was one of the interesting questions that I found in the data. And filling that gap, I think, is why we're here today and is exactly what Leadership Montana is all about. Now, relating back to the concept of civic engagement, let's think for a moment about community trusteeship. The same exploration frames our trusteeship of our organization, be it our company or a nonprofit, our community, and our state. What's the heritage of the community? Who were the trustees? What were the significant themes or events that defined the community historically? The answers to these questions will help leaders today as they deal with current issues. Call on the wisdom of the community trust holders. I had the privilege of serving on the board as president of the board of directors of the Alberta Bear Theater this past year. And one of the neat ways that that organization honors its heritage is to involve founding board members in our board of directors and in the critical issues that we're facing. The board members that created the theater 20 years ago. And an even better example is Tracie's reference to the elders being brought into the critical decisions of the tribes, calling on the wisdom and honoring the legacy of the tribal elders in taking the tribe forward. Trusteeship of community requires a knowledge of one's personal mission and how it can be expressed in the community. And this requires an ability to listen, to be open to discomfort, giving up your position long enough to let another's position on an issue emerge, and a confidence to acknowledge differences without the fear of a loss of identity or damaged relationships. In Leadership Montana, we define that as gracious space, and we use this little guide by Patricia M. Hughes called Gracious Space, a practical guide for working better together. Gracious space is a spirit and a setting where we invite in the stranger and embrace learning in public. Trusteeship at the community level calls for diverse voices at the table. Tracie also talked about this, inviting in the stranger. In another excellent book, The Leadership Challenge, Jane Kozis wrote, extensive knowledge of history and the outside world only increases your awareness of competing value systems, of the many principles by which individuals, organizations, and states can choose to function. You cannot lead others until you have first led yourself through a struggle of opposing values. Trusteeship seeks to ensure that community conversations and choices are made in an inclusive way that honors diversity. Trustees are initiators and participants in a vision for their community and organization. They ensure the articulation of the vision in creative and compelling ways. Our civic engagement through volunteerism provides us with a unique opportunity to exercise our passions and preserve the habits of the heart that many are concerned we've lost in today's society, that we may indeed be bowling alone. In Leadership Montana, we believe that an understanding of the role of trusteeship, holding in trust, is integral to the development of leadership that can strengthen our families, our organizations, our communities, and our state, and turn our abundant civic capacity into powerful civic engagement. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.